So some of you may be wondering, wow, it's been a long time since I've seen Lauren or heard from her. What's she up to? And I wanted to make this video kind of in a response to that, in a way in which you could see the passion, the joy, the sorrow in times of my life, but also kind of a recap on how did I end up on this idea of religious life? How did I end up with this idea of being a Catholic sister? Didn't you graduate with bioengineering degree? Um, and I wanted to be able to express this in a way in which you could see how deeply fundamental this was to me and how much of a decision I've been praying about this really throughout my entire life, but also the amount of joy and peace that it gives me in being able to say yes to this call in my life. Um, and so really, ever since I was very young, um, faith has always been important to me. And I remember I had the opportunity to go to One Bread, One Cup. It's a Benedictine seminary and monastery in St. Meinrad. And that was one of the first times when I was just on fire for my faith. I felt here's a community of people that love God so firmly. And I was like, I'm not alone here, as I had felt so much throughout, middle school and things like that. And, this passion I got back and it just kept living in my heart. And for others, it was like there's kind of this spiritual high, but then it kind of dwindles off. And I just kept feeling this desire stronger and stronger. And so high school was a period of incredible growth, but also a period where I lived two different lives. This one life that I let everyone see that, I was living this incredible life, making good grades, had a lot of great friends and a lot of great clubs and activities. Um, but deepest within me, I was just longing. I felt incredibly alone in my faith life, and despite having older brothers, they were now in college that were often my rock. Um, I didn't feel very connected to other communities where I was from, and I just remember so many nights, crying myself to sleep because I felt this such a strong passion and desire, but I didn't have anybody to share it with. And so then going off to a Jesuit college or a Catholic college, that similar to the Benedictines or the Franciscans, the Jesuits are one other form of religious order. And I thought, man, this is going to change. And in many ways it did. I got connected with campus ministry and all these other wonderful people that helped me to grow in my faith and understand some of the roots of some of the injustices and other things. But there was still this longing, and I still felt like I love Santa Clara more than everything. And I don't think it's necessarily the university, but I still felt alone. Um, and throughout all of my 4 years of education, I loved what I was studying. I got so excited with bioengineering. And really what I loved about bioengineering was the ability to make these incredible insights and analogies to my faith. And I was just so intrigued by everything I was learning. In my sophomore year, I was introduced to a class called Intro to Social Entrepreneurship. Um, and for me, I was like, great, throw social entrepreneurship together. No idea what that means. Kind of sounds fancy, but I don't know what's up to that. But I realized, which I still believe is so core to who I am, is that this is one of the most transformative ways to solve problems with inequality, with poverty, with really creating change within our world from a grassroots level. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And all of a sudden, up to that point in my life, I had thought about religious life, and I thought, that could be a beautiful way of life. And I never really felt it coming from God, but I knew it was one of my desires. But after taking that class, I was like, I felt so strongly that this is where God was calling me. And I wanted to respond to that call. And um, And so I took this class. It was a normal quarter class. And then the following year, I had the opportunity um, to apply, and I was selected to be a global social benefit fellow. And so that's basically a 9-month program of doing action research with a social enterprise in the developing world. And I remember prior to that, I was talking with the director, who's actually a Franciscan brother of that program, Brother Keith Warner. And I said, Keith, like my heart is in love with this idea of social entrepreneurship, but I had just gotten back from a silent retreat, and I said, but my heart is also kind of being pulled to this idea of religious life again. And he kind of said to me, Lauren, why do you see these as two exclusionary things? Do you not think that they could possibly be one? And I was like, okay, Keith, tell me where there are social enterprises and religious congregations coming together. And he's like, well, it may not be that far off. A little did I know that the Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship, which is where my fellowship was placed at Santa Clara University, was creating this model called the Sisters Blended Value Project, which helped Catholic congregations incorporate social enterprises into their existing social ministries so that the Catholic congregations themselves could be more financially sustainable and wouldn't have to rely on grants and other funds, but at the same time they could make a more greater impact in their community. And luckily for me, there was also a fellowship that was working at the interconnection of those that I was chosen for. And so I got to spend 2 of those 9 months in Kenya working for a social enterprise called Eggpreneur, where really I was helping them really integrate this model into their existing social ministries of Catholic congregations. So I spent 5 weeks living with Catholic sisters, praying with them, joking around with them. And it was really in those moments when I felt so strongly, Lauren, this is what I'm calling you to. And leaving that place was so hard, but I knew coming back that I had to take this idea of religious life more seriously. And so I came back, I was talking with Keith, and I called up, at the time was a Jesuit novice when I was a freshman, and I said, hey, like I'm discerning this, do you have any recommendations or anything that you know? He said, well, there's this group of Catholic sisters, he's in Philly now, in Philly that have a really strong Ignatian spirituality. And going to a Jesuit school, Ignatian spirituality is the foundation of a lot of what they believe in, how they teach. And I was like, great. And so I looked them up. I did my research as a good engineering student would. And I reached out to the Vocation director, and I really prayed about it. And it was crazy because although I was thinking maybe later on I'll go visit them, it was like a, Lauren, before school, which happened to be like in less than a month, go visit them. And so kind of laying my hands down, I said, okay, God. And I went and visited them. And it was the most incredible experience I've ever had. I felt for one of the first times that I belonged there. And I got back and I was talking to Brother Keith Warner, the director of our fellowship. And I said, I've never felt more understood in my life. And he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Repeat that really quickly. Let me just tell you what you said, because what you just said was a really big statement. And he said, you just said that you never felt more understood in your life. And I said, absolutely. And he said, okay, Lauren, that's really something to consider. And so what I realized was that as I continued going on, I just kept falling more and more in love with this, not necessarily even the congregation, yes, so, but even more in love with God. And this desire that sometimes, you go on this retreat, you have this visit, and then it kind of dies away. It became more intensified and intensified. And I felt that this congregation was not a new way of living, but it was the fulfillment of so many things that I had loved and valued. And I went and visited another of their communities within the same congregation in Athens that were working with immigrants. And just the way in which I felt, this is my home. This is where I belong. It became so clear to me. And so it's crazy that within the time span of 4-5-ish months, I said, yes, this is where I want, this is where I feel that God is calling me. And after getting accepted into the congregation, I went and visited again my last couple of weeks of school, and I felt visiting that this was home. And for me, that was the greatest joy that and the greatest sense of peace that I could ever hope for. And I know that the future ahead of me is not easy. I know that I will face many challenges, but in this moment, I have to live with this joy and this peace, and recognize that God has been so loving and so generous to lead me this route. And what more could I do than to lay down my life and say yes? To say yes, to be able to serve those, to serve the most marginalized, um, and and to be a handmaid of the Lord. And so I share all this that you can see really the joy and the enthusiasm in how this has really been a part of my life ever since I was very young, how different opportunities have led me down different routes, um, and how now, um, in August, hopefully August 22nd, I'll get the opportunity to be a postulant in the Handmaids of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And just truly what tremendous joy and peace that brings me. And so if you're watching this video, um, I I hope that you see this passion and this joy in me. Um, but I also want to thank you if I ever had any opportunity to interact with you, because you're part of the reason um, that I've been able to walk this path that many times I felt alone. But even the slight ways and the little smiles, the jokes, whether you're a high school friend or a teacher, or somebody that knew me when I grew up in Columbia, Missouri, um, you all have impacted my life and have helped me to say this yes in my life. And so I thank you as well for the journey that you've also taken with me. And know that as I continue in this next stage of my life, that my prayers will be with you. And I also ask that you pray for me. Please reach out if you have any questions, if you'd like to get to understand me and my story better. Um, but I'm just so blessed and overwhelmed with this great gift that God has given me, and I'm excited to see the ways in which He'll continue to use me. So I hope that this little video gives you a little bit of insight into this crazy but beautiful decision I've made.